After replacing all 8 fuel injectors in my new used Range Rover, here's what its first startup looked like. Now get this, the Land Rover dealer charges $6,200 to replace fuel injectors on an 8-cylinder Range Rover. To put things in perspective, for $6,200 you can buy a well-used Range Rover or 6 extremely well-used Range Rover Sports. These all seem like much better deals until you see a bubbling coolant tank. But every time I buy one of these, your comments greatly vary from negative to extremely negative, and understandably so. I've tried to have the Range Rover experience on a budget and miserably failed every single time. The first one only cost me $1,400 and well, it was really far gone from the moment I first started it up. Thought I splurged on the second one, spending more than double the first at around $3,000. Well, this one came with the engine taken apart and quickly turned into a major financial disaster. After dumping several thousand more to get it to run, I would never get it to run right, and I ended up losing more money on the car than it cost me in the first place. This go around, I really upped the ante and spent 7 times what I did on the last one, figuring I would have a way different outcome. I mean, it did work pretty well for me for 3 whole days before it broke down with a fuel system issue, which we've pretty much narrowed down as a failed fuel injector. Now, I know it's not the end of the world, at least not yet, but it kind of would be if I just rolled into the dealer and paid $6,200 to get it fixed. This is where you can get severely had buying one of these cars used. Even though these injectors were super stuck in this engine, we used a little shade tree ingenuity to get them out. It was super sketchy, but it actually worked. Using the pulling strength of an engine hoist to rip these injectors out felt like my only option here, but after showing this method, there's one comment that seemed absolutely brilliant, and I just have to know if this would actually work, as having a super stuck fuel injector is a pretty common issue on this engine. That car guy said, a little trick I've used on my Range Rover to get the injectors out is to remove fuel rail and whatever's attached to the injectors, pull the fuel pump fuse, leave the spark plugs in, and crank the engine and let compression help you. Now I'm super curious to know if this actually works, but not curious enough to go buy another one of these cars at the moment, so let me know in the comment section if you think this is a viable method. Either way, since all 8 of our injectors are out, it's time we put 8 new ones back in for way less than $6,200, and hopefully this fixes our issue. Now $6,200 sounds like a lot of money. That's because it is a ton of money. So what the dealership will do is they'll figure out exactly which fuel injector has failed, and then they'll propose to their client that they only replace one bank of fuel injectors. That takes the job from $6,200 to about half, around $3,000. And I just can only imagine that more people are likely to pay for a $3,000 repair than a $6,000 repair, especially considering when these things are known to fail. My car has more than 100,000 miles on it, so if they're bringing in their 100,000 mile Range Rover and get a $6,000 repair estimate, they're more than likely to trade it in, which makes me wonder, do you think that my car was potentially traded in because it had this issue? Maybe the service center just went and dumped a bunch of fuel injector cleaner in it, got it to run, and that's why it only lasted 3 days on me? Just a thought. It's more than likely a coincidence. It is a Range Rover, and no matter what you think about the cost of the service, the majority of the price is actually in the fuel injectors themselves and not in the labor. Fuel injectors are known to be pretty costly maintenance items. This BMW 335 right here takes a set of 6 injectors that will run you over $3,000 just for the injectors themselves. Considering this, the Range Rover injectors are a relative bargain. Now the dealership wants between $400 and $500 a piece. That's where you get $3,000 and $6,000 repair bills, but if you buy them over at FCP Euro, they're under $100 a piece when you buy a set of 8. Of course, they come with a lifetime guarantee, something you're not going to get from the dealership, but the most important part is you know you're getting a genuine part, and that's super important when it comes to buying injectors. If you shop around, you can find a lot of different fuel injectors. For cars like this BMW or my Range Rover, it doesn't matter what make or model, you'll find them way cheaper than at the dealer or even a place like FCP Euro. The problem is, a lot of these are Chinese knockoff injectors. These are secondary injectors made to look like the originals, and in some cases, they'll even come in replica OEM boxes. I've heard of fake injectors coming in a box that says Bosch on them, looks just like the one we have right here for this Range Rover, but they are not real. In this video from Injectors Online, which I'll go ahead and link below, the host Simon explains that a customer brought in a set of 42-pound Bosch injectors he got really cheap off of eBay and was super excited because of their price. So he put them on his tester, and just look at the results. The 2 on the right were dead right out of the box, and look at the inconsistent spray patterns here and the flow rate of each.
Okay, with 2 not working at all, they should be up around 110, those ones. They fall well short of the mark, they're all uneven.
If you compare that with a genuine set of Bosch 42-pound injectors, each one flows nearly the same as the other. It's not even close. I'll admit it, I'm the first guy to try and mess around and buy a cheap aftermarket part and see if it'll work as good as a factory one, but when it comes to fuel injectors, there is no messing around. The crazy thing about these fake fuel injectors, they seem to be available for almost every make and model. It feels like I've seen just as many fake fuel injectors out there as there are cars right now over at the salvage auction. At the time of this recording, there are currently over 300,000 cars available at just one of the major salvage auctions. Nearly 2/3 of these were involved in a serious crash. When I see these cars, I always think about the people. Are they okay? Did it affect their life? It's one of the reasons I remember Pound Law, which is the phone number for Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Like many other Floridians, I'm very familiar with Morgan & Morgan, and it's clear they've become a trusted name when it comes to protection for us, for the people. Their attorneys focus on every area of personal injury protection, including car accidents, slip and falls, workplace injuries, medical malpractice, nursing home abuse, and more. With a team of over 800 attorneys in 49 states, Morgan & Morgan has recovered more than $13 billion for their clients. If you're ever injured in an accident, consider reaching out to Morgan & Morgan. Everything is totally free of charge unless they win your case. Get the compensation that you're deserved by visiting forthepeople.com/Samcrac, or you can simply dial Pound Law from your cell phone. That's forthepeople.com/Samcrac, or just hit that link in the description box. We are ready to set in place our fuel injectors. They just sit in these little holes right here where you can actually see the metal of the cylinder head. But before we do, I went and I took my scope camera. I just want to make sure it was all clean down in there, and take a look at this one. There's all this sort of like carbon dust in there. It's really gross. So very simply, I have myself a vacuum cleaner hooked up to a battery pack here, and then I've got this really fancy homemade extension. Look at this, it's perfect. Look at how perfect this sits in here. So we'll be able to vacuum out all of our little crevices before we go and reassemble everything. Since we've done this one before, I'm semi-familiar with these. What's funny about these fuel injectors is you get everything you need, but one little piece you got to grab off your old injector. So it's got a new O-ring on the end. We've got a brand new Teflon seal here, but you got to take this little metal ring off your old injector and slide it right over the top. This puts a little bit of tension from the rail down onto the injector so it stays right in place. Now all we got to do is set these back in the place we yanked them out of. We got to make sure they're as square as possible, because when we set the rail on top, the O-ring is going to seal in these little guys here, and then these are the screw holes. When we screw it in place, we're going to do a little bit evenly, and that'll press these back in the cylinder head. Of course, right as I get everything hooked up, it starts to rain. I've got everything connected. Yeah, there's a few loose bolts that I need to tighten up. We need to get the cowl and everything put back in place. But if we did the repair right, and our problem was the fuel injector, this car should run good and no longer smoke. Let's go ahead. I'm gonna get a camera really quick set up on the tailpipe so we can monitor that. Let's fire this thing. Let's go. 3, 2, 1, fire. Okay. Oh. Okay, long crank because the fuel rails are completely empty, but since that occurred, let's make sure we are not leaking everywhere. This is the main one that I was concerned about here. Let's feel dry. That's nice. Okay. Let's see over here. All those look dry. I don't see any puddles anywhere. All right, we fire it for real now. 3, 2, 1. Oh, come on. Oh my God, I cannot believe I wasn't recording. Yeah. Let's try that again. I got the car to fire, but what came out is not what I wanted to see. I can't believe this. I mean, to be honest, the car sounds like it's running better. Like, it sounds like it's running a lot better. So I don't think that little bit of penetrating oil that made its way in the cylinder would be smoking that long. Here, I'm gonna give it a few revs. I mean, the car is, look at that idle. The perfect idle. Now, in the moment, I was really confused. Smoke out our tailpipes was one of the major obvious symptoms that we had before. But comparing what we're seeing right now with what we saw before, we have two very clear, or maybe I should say, smoky differences. If you look here, the smoke out of our tailpipes before was much more dense and sporadic, whereas now, the smoke is very consistent and thin, but the biggest difference that you can't see is the smell. Before, it smelled like you stuck your nose in a pail of gasoline. There's no smell to this. It is very similar to what you would see if you were doing a seafoam treatment on your car. It's holding idle perfectly. Come on, is there smoke? Look. What in the heck is going on? I don't see any fuel seeping out of the areas. The engine sounds right. We'll give it what's known as the Italian tune-up. Just drive it a little bit and see if that smoke pretty much clears. All right, here we go. See how smooth it is? I've got it holding in first gear. Before, we would have a blinking check engine light. I'm pretty sure we are resolved here. That was just residual, whatever was left over. Very nice. All right, this Range Rover has been in the same spot in the field for over a month, so it's good to see it in front of the barn. I've just got the code reader hooked up. I'm gonna do a full system scan. We're gonna have a bunch of codes because of our cranking and whatnot. So what I wanna do right off the bat is just clear everything. Remember, when I got this car, it had no fault codes, and look, one fault code came right back. All right, one is better than the amount we had before, but let's see what we got in the engine control module. We got a nonsense code, so we should be good to go. I would shut it off and then turn it back on, but I think the battery's too weak for that. Let me go ahead and plug it in, and then I can finish buttoning it up. With our codes clear, I put a bottle of fuel system cleaner in the tank and just drove. Initially, I monitored most of our fuel system's live data to make sure everything looked right, and it was really darn good. Remember, before our requested and actual values for fuel rail pressure were messy and all over the place. Now they were really close, which is exactly what we want. The fuel trims were wonky over the first mile or two, but quickly cleaned up and started looking great. For the next couple of days, I drove the Range Rover everywhere, putting over 100 miles on it. There's an obvious difference in how it was running before and how it's running now. I did notice a very small but regular stumble at idle before, and now it's unbelievably smooth and drives like I would expect a brand new one to. What an incredible difference. Every time I release a video on a new Range Rover that I buy, the comment section always tells me that I'm either an idiot, I'm doing this strictly for the content, or again, that I'm an idiot. The truth is, when it comes to this specific Range Rover, I bought this car because it had an excellent service history, and it's a car I wanted to have and wanted to enjoy, and I guess I was kidding myself, but if you look at the first video, there was hardly any footage leading up to this thing breaking down. Literally, I got the car, we put some brakes in it. I did record that footage in case I could use it at a later date if it did break, and well, let's just say the date wasn't that later. But the truth is, I'm a huge Land Rover, specifically Range Rover fan, because there's nothing that quite drives like one of these cars, and you have to drive it and be driven in it to understand exactly what I'm talking about. But I would venture to tell you that if you took a random person, stuck them in the back seat of this car blindfolded, and drove them 10 miles and did the same exact thing with a brand new $500,000 Rolls-Royce Cullinan, they wouldn't be able to tell you which one rode better. And that's what's so impressive about the Range Rovers. On top of that, for the amount of mass that this car has, it handles like incredibly. It doesn't have a huge turning radius, and since this has the 5-liter supercharged engine, it is quick. We'll let it change the gears on its own. I'm gonna put my foot to the floor and just look at how hard this car pulls. Wow. All right, that is enough driving. This is the real draw to this car. It is the back seat, and it's incredible back here. Of course, since it's the long wheelbase, I have a ton of leg room, and I have this entire like entertainment center in front of me. But before I show you any more of the back seat, let's talk about what this car cost me, and then you tell me that it wasn't an amazing bargain. So a little bit over $22,000 is what bought this car at the auction. It is a Range Rover Autobiography with the executive seating package, and it's got right around 115,000 miles on it. So some solid miles, but again, this is the best Range Rover you can buy. The Autobiography package is something I've always had a hard time understanding because the price premium is huge compared to just a regular loaded up V8 Supercharged Range Rover, but if you park them next to each other, I think you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference. So I'm not sure what else the Autobiography comes with besides a really nice badge on the rear deck and on the door sills that says Autobiography, but it is what it is. I'll take that price premium because it will help me when I go to sell it. Then we did the brakes, which ran right around $600. Of course, it was a DIY job, but everything got done. Rotors, pads, hardware, new fluid. I'd imagine at the dealership that would cost well over $2,000, if not around $3,000. And then, of course, we can't forget the fuel injectors at around $800. Obviously, I did some different fluid changes. I did the transmission filter. I'll spend another few $100 touching up the front bumper. It's got one really big paint spot missing out of it. But otherwise, specifically inside, the condition of this car is pretty darn decent. So we'll figure that we'll be in this car $24,000 if nothing else breaks. But for that, you get this incredible back seat. And I'm excited to get into this with you guys because I have hardly spent any time back here myself, so I want to explore a bit. The first thing you notice is just how amazingly comfortable this seat is. You're sitting high off the ground. You've got a ton of leg room, again, because it's the long wheelbase. There's a bunch of adjustability. And of course, you have heated, air conditioned, and massage functions all at your control in this really nice center console. It's all trimmed out in wood, and it separates you from your passenger. So it just feels super special. Amazingly enough, it came with the remote that controls the 2 TV screens back here. I'm really surprised this did not disappear between the auction, the transporter, and then to me. But it's here along with a set of wireless Range Rover headphones, and from what I understand, you can have 2 different things going on either TV, so each passenger can do whatever they want separately. As far as what you can actually use these TVs for, there's a DVD player built in to the dashboard, and then there's a set of audio video inputs in here. So that dates the car and restricts what you can do nowadays. All right, so the screens themselves might be a bit limited in their functions, but if you consider that the Nintendo 64 is one of the best video game consoles of all time, and it uses AV inputs, you can enjoy some of the best video games in the best car on the road. I really hope that sales pitch works when I try and get rid of this thing. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a huge like. Also, if you're not already following me on Instagram, where I post updates there, like if the Range Rover ends up breaking down again, which we'll hope it doesn't, it'll show up on Instagram before it does here on YouTube. So right here, or just hit the link in the description box. I really want to thank each and every one of you for watching today, and I'll catch you very soon.